Welcome back. We will start with our technical sessions. Session 1 is on challenges and opportunities for stakeholders of industry, suppliers, buyers, and policymakers. May I request Ms. Gauri Johar, Executive Director, IHS Markit, to come on stage. Ms. Gauri Johar is the Executive Director, Integrated Solutions in IHS Markit's Energy Consulting Team, covering the Asia and Middle East markets. Gauri's prime focus is conceptualizing and leading the delivery of consulting projects in Indian energy related to energy policy development, energy market opening, and utilizing global energy best practices to create a competitive Indian energy sector. Her areas of specialization are financial and operational competitor benchmarking, gas pricing, market entry strategies, and energy policy development. She leads the energy-wide prospective team in India and mentors a growing team of researchers across the energy value chain. She represents IHS Markit in various industry bodies such as US-India Gas Tank Task Force, US-India Strategic Partnership Forum's Renewable Energy Task Force, and the Gas Committee at the Federation of India Petroleum Industry. Prior to joining IHS Marketing, Gauri was Commercial Advisor, Gas Policy and Regulatory Affairs at BP in India. She was the Gas Policy Lead for multidisciplinary team leading BP's gas reforms advocacy efforts in India. Prior to joining BP, Gauri was a senior consultant at PFC Energy, leading PFC's energy business in India and Singapore. Gauri started her career as a research associate at the National Council of Applied Economic Research in Delhi, analyzing macroeconomic policy issues for the Indian economy, and her paper with D.K. Doshi on India's macro stabilization policy in 1990s. A review and assessment was published in a book, The Indian State in Transition. Gauri has an MBA in finance from the Johns Hopkins University and an MS in international economics and an MA in economics from the Delhi School of Economics. She has additional certifications in climate change mitigation in developing countries, University of Cape Town Online, Economics of Clean Energy Transition, Stanford University Online, Design Thinking, IDEO University Online. Gauri will be presenting a presentation right now on unlocking natural gas value chain. Along with her, she will be moderating a session where we will have panelists, Mr. Prashant Banerjee, Mr. Ashwini Dudeja, Mr. Ashish Chitani, Mr. Amit Garg. May I request all of you to come on stage, please? Now the stage is all yours, Gauri.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting IHS Markit to this platform, especially focused on the gas business in India. The title is quite aptly put, Unlocking the Natural Gas Value Chain. I think, the inaugural keynote session, we had several luminaries of the gas and the automotive industry like Mr. R.C. Bhargav and Mr. Saraf, who mentioned, how there is a lot of potential in this gas value chain, and really what is it upon us as a gas industry really to unlock the natural gas value chain. First, I'd like to just give you a brief overview of IHS Markit. I'm joined here by Nirmal Shani, our country head for IHS Markit. And in terms of what we do, I focus on the consulting side of the business here. And we've covered about more than 1,000 consulting projects to date. We serve 34 countries, over 130 offices, and we serve 85% of the global Fortune 500. In terms of the industries we serve, we cut across about 11 connected and core industries which span energy, chemicals, financial markets, economics and country risk, engineering and product design, regulatory compliance and risk, digital web solutions, maritime and trade, aerospace, defense and security, and the automotive business. Coming back to the gas value chain, anytime we begin discussing the benefits of a certain fuel in the primary energy mix, and remember that there are several choices. There is oil, there is gas, there is coal, there's renewables increasingly, there is nuclear, there is hydro, there's biomass. So if you look at this whole space of energy choices, three things really stand out for gas as a choice, as a fuel of choice. And we believe those three things really are affordability, reliability, and sustainability. And if you unpack each element of the affordability, the reliability, and the sustainability, what we begin to see is that there are merits of gas as a fuel, as a technical choice, but they also marry the policy aspects which push gas in the primary energy mix. There is a push by the Indian government to push it from 6% to about 15% in the primary energy mix. And in terms of affordability, it's about really bringing it in a cost-competitive framework to coal in the power sector, renewables in the power sector, and to liquid fuels in the transportation sector. In terms of reliability, it is about making our lives far more reliable, whether we talk about mobility solutions, last-mile mobility solutions, or we talk about, in the power mix, to have 24/7 power. And I'm joined here by my colleagues who will delve into several of these issues. And on sustainability, I think if you look at any conference, any platform, any thought leadership that comes out these days from companies, institutions, it is all about sustainability, because I think there's a growing awareness that we are reaching some critical points in our lives on this planet in terms of increase in global temperatures of about 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees centigrade, which really are supposed, according to climate scientists, bring us on the brink of sustainability. And given this, again, gas has features which make it the cleanest fossil fuel. So it is the only fuel which in the carbon spectrum has the best parameters in terms of carbon dioxide, SOx and NOx emissions. So it just improves the usage profile of whether if it's an industry using it, it's a car using it, it's a household using it, or it's even the power generators using it. Another term which is used alongside gas or any fuel choice today is the energy transition. That we're in the middle of an energy transition which is driven by the impetus for sustainability or climate change. But what does that mean in the long term? And this means that no matter which fuel it is, right, coal has to become cleaner, gas has to find its role in the energy mix and sustain its role in the energy mix. And renewables is increasingly challenging all these sort of foundational fuels that have existed, whether it is gas or coal or oil, over the last century. What we see here is that if you look at the 2015 level, and the reason we've started with 2015 is because that was when the Paris Climate Agreement really came into force. Gas was what is the light green, the grass green color in these charts. Gas was about 22% of the global primary energy mix. And if you look at certain key bookends which the global industry looks at in terms of what is the future primary energy mix looking like, you look at the Shell Sky scenario, you look at the BP RT scenario, you look at the IPCC P1, P2, P3, P4 scenarios, and you look at the IEA STS scenario. And no matter which scenario you look at, you're looking at gas at least about 14 to 15% in the primary energy mix. And of course, our own scenarios, which keep gas at about 20% of the primary energy mix. So given the world will still be relying on coal, but it'll be a cleaner sort of coal, we find that gas actually is the cleanest fossil fuel and is the only fossil fuel which will actually grow. The other fossil fuels will begin to plateau and then eventually decline. However, it's not all a hunky-dory story here. It's about creating demand. It's about, because that demand is likely to be challenged. No longer are, long-term contracts with premium customers the norm. Now it is about bringing in shorter-term contracts, showing the shorter end of the industry, and with sometimes challenging customers on payment terms. Whenever you're looking at gas as a fossil fuel, you need to understand about the pricing policies regarding gas. And what we're seeing there is that increasingly, there has been a traditional linkage of gas with liquid fuels. And that is beginning to be challenged because the growth of domestic gas in the US, also in parts of Europe, have brought about certain hub-based mechanisms which are challenging this linkage, this gas to liquids linkage, and changing it more to a gas-to-gas competition. I think why this is important to us in India is that these pricing mechanisms will increasingly be used as choice to price contracts, long-term possibly, but definitely possibly short-term contracts. And we've seen the impact of some of these hubs in some of the new gas pricing policies domestically as well, where they've been priced out of the Henry Hub, the ECO Hub in Canada, and the Russian gas price. In terms of LNG versus domestic gas, India is a very interesting market that we're almost a 50-50 market of domestic and imported gas. And it's fascinating because in 2004, in just 16 years back, we did not import LNG. So this definitely calls upon for a greater thrust of the domestic industry with the new pricing mechanisms which are incentivizing domestic gas to make sure that domestic gas comes to market. And I think this dependence on imports may get tempered in the short term, but in the medium to long term, we still believe a lot more gas needs to be explored for this picture to change. In terms of infrastructure, I think you've heard in the morning session, there's been, this is one of the most fascinating times in the Indian gas industry because we literally have pipelines coming together in the eastern states, the northeastern states. We have LNG terminals coming both on the East Coast and the West Coast. We have new domestic gas production coming in the East Coast, significant gas production. There are smaller volumes even in the West Coast. And we have new LNG imports coming in. So it's really a time in the next 3 to 5 years of coming together of the infrastructure, the supply, and market creation. Finally, gas has to compete on an economic basis. That is the basis of any primary energy mix. And whether there are incentives or subsidies or mandates, the impacts of those as government support measures last only for about 5 to 10 years. They have a sort of a shelf life in that sense. And if you look at how LNG and gas competes with the different fuel mixes in the transport, industrial, domestic, commercial space or power space, clearly gas and LNG give you an automatic cost advantage when you compare it to liquid fuels. The story becomes more challenging when you compare it to coal because we still don't have carbon pricing mechanisms to factor in the environmental downsides and externalities of coal. And gas is also challenged vis-a-vis renewables. And that is, wherever it is challenged is the space for building a partnership with the fuel, which I think Ashwini, you'll be probably talking about more. So on the basis of that sort of scene-setting presentation, if you will, we really have an expert panel here, who actually live and breathe this day in and day out. They're the ones who are actually creating these gas markets. And I think it's an very interesting panel because we have, unlocking of the natural gas value chain, and we have really every component of the value chain here. We have Ashwini, you from the supplier end, but also from like the LNG terminal and infrastructure end. We have, so Ashwini is the country head of Shell Energy in India. We have Ashish Chutani, who comes in more from the consumer end, from the automotive end, where we heard about all the high growth numbers, potential growth numbers. And Ashish leads the policy and government relations function for Maruti Suzuki. And then we have the real connector here, who is on the gas downstream end, Mr. Amit Garg, who is who's leading the commercial function for IGL. So I think starting upstream, I'd like to start with you, Ashwini, in terms of your thoughts on how the supply revolution is really creating more options across the value chain.
Thank you, Gauri, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me and sharing my views. Um, so Gauri already mentioned, I head the gas, power, and LNG business for Shell in India, and we have a 5 million tons LNG terminal, receiving terminal in Hazira. So you mentioned about the global supply dynamics. It's actually very interesting right now. Just 2 weeks ago we presented our annual LNG outlook, in which we have you know reinforced some of the messages which came from the previous versions of our LNG outlook, which is that at the moment we are in the fastest phase of LNG supply growth in the world. The last 2 years, both 2019 and 2018, have been perhaps the fastest growing years for LNG supply. And of course, the demand has not been keeping up pace with this kind of a supply. And a lot of volume is actually going into Europe, which indicates that, there is, not enough depth in the Asian markets at the moment, and hence the LNG is getting diverted into these European sinks. Uh, but what it also talks about is, that in the last 5 years, there have not been many, FIDs which have happened for new projects. And, what it typically means, a new LNG project takes typically 5 to 7 years from, the date of FID to the actual commissioning. And it is a very high capex requirement. And given, the lack of long-term contracts, it is even more difficult to get FIDs these days. So all in all, whatever supply addition has to happen, a majority of that is already done. We perhaps left with another 15 to 20 million tons, which will happen this year. And then starting next year and several years thereafter, we don't have any new project coming up on stream. So what it means really is that, and demand is likely to continue given all the energy transition slides which you mentioned, gas being one of the most uh, environmentally fuel friendly hydrocarbon. The share of gas has to increase, not just in India but globally, and hence in that context, the demand is going to increase and at some stage intersect the supply side. And it may not be very difficult to visualize a situation where the gas prices against there's a gas LNG shortage and the gas prices again start going up. But before we reach that stage, I think this is a very good period for Indian buyers, according to me, to take up some, investments, take up some long-term commitments, and, create a demand in the Indian market. The terms of contracts are very flexible these days. The length of the contract has reduced, but, the mosaic of pricing option which is available today, you can index it to, to Henry Hub, to NBP,
Right.
Brent. These were all traditional indices which were used, but some of you may have read, we've also signed a coal-linked
Yes.
LNG contract in Japan about 1 year ago. So, there is a mosaic of option which is now available to the buyers in India, and it's a very good time for, for Indian buyers, and especially in the light of, the emphasis which government is laying in increasing the market share of gas from 6 to 15% by, auctioning the CGD licenses across the country.
Yeah.
And, even though that demand ramp up is going to happen over a period of time, I think it is very good time for the gas industry as such in India to increase the overall market pie.
Sure. So moving along the value chain, I think I'd like to ask Amit if you can share, what, as Ashwini painted a very encouraging picture that there is supply, right? There is supply that is already committed into the system. And clearly this is a buyer's market. So how are you connecting that supply, being India's largest CNG distribution company? And you're on the commercial end of it, and I think Ashwini alluded to, better contracts with customers, more option, more mosaic of options. So how do you view this when you are going in and putting in new CNG networks around the country? and especially in Delhi. I mean, Delhi is a great success story. If you can even start with that, I think that'll be.
Yeah, thank you, Gauri. And I think to set the tone and add on to what Ashwani has said, IGL has been registering double-digit growth for the past 16 quarters. If that is something to cheer about, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So if supplies are available, there are people available who are ready to sell, who are ready to grow. And I think IGL, as you rightly said, is a great success story because we believe in our people, we believe in our customers,